16th year here at DePaul. And welcome to my grandmother's dining room. See the chandeliers? Same chandeliers my grandma had. So welcome to DePaul. I'm a little nervous tonight for a couple reasons. One, I've seen your Instagram. I've seen the speakers you guys have. And they are phenomenal speakers that you guys have had in here. So I hate following them, but you guys have had some great faith leaders in here. With the Widers, I knew Ben. I weirdly helped recruit Ben here. Even though he was a soccer recruit, the soccer coach had the football coach call him for some reason, but I helped him get here. And he's helped me while we're here. He obviously started this chapter here, so it's been awesome. The second reason I'm a little nervous is I've never given this specific talk before. I normally give chapter 1. You guys heard chapter 1 last year. For those of you that were here last year, anytime you need to go give these things, I give my testimony, I give my story. It's called Faith Over Fear. I'm very comfortable with that. I got that. I'm giving you guys chapter 2 of my book here. Okay? So I've never given this speech before, so I'm going to look at my notes a little bit more than I normally would, but it is what it is. Hopefully, you guys will get some good stuff out of it. My talk tonight is going to be called Commitment Over Feelings. So what the heck does a football coach have to do with feelings? Well, I got feelings too. Okay? So football coaches have all kinds of feelings, mostly nervous, mostly panic, mostly waking up in the middle of the night. But I want to talk about commitment over feelings. Okay? So in success, whether in sports, or in your walk with Christ, success is not determined by how you feel in a moment, right? How successful you are ultimately is determined with how committed you have been in the process, right? And so that's kind of like my thesis or so for this talk, okay? And so I'm going to talk about not earth-shattering things today, but hopefully things that can help remind you of having faith, and instead of, when things get hard, instead of fleeting in your faith, okay? I'm sure everybody has days. Everybody's an athlete in here. Almost everybody's an athlete here. I'm sure you have days where you don't feel like practicing, right? I have days where I don't feel like coaching football. You may be sore, you may be tired, you may be frustrated, whether in your sports life or your personal life, but the best athletes still show up, right? The teams still show up and be committed when it's time to be committed, right? Commitment's what separates the average from the great. Okay? For example, like Kobe. Kobe Bryant maybe have the most diehard, committed, disciplined stories. If you ever hear him talk about his daily routine, like he's the epitome of being committed, staying in it, right, and getting after it, right? And not most of us don't go to that extreme, but most of us are a lot more committed than your average high school student because you're here playing really good college football, baseball, whatever you're here playing. DePaul's a good athletic institution, so you've had a level of commitment, right? But the same has to be true of our faith, right? We can't be a Christian only when it feels good, right? We have to be a Christian at all times. And true faith shows up when it's really hard, right? And so that's kind of my intro there. So I'm going to take you through a couple different of my sub-chapters here. And the first one is following Christ requires daily commitment. Okay? So the Bible verse here is from Luke 9:23. He said, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. Right? I believe that God put words in the Bible very intentionally. Right? I believe stuff's been translated a lot of times, but I believe there's still words in the Bible that are there very intentionally, and I believe in this quote here, daily is very intentional, right? Think about being an athlete, right? What it takes to become a college athlete. You didn't just show up to the games, right? You didn't just show up to practice when you're in season. To be a college athlete, you have to be committed almost daily year-round, right? There's obviously days off and stuff like that, but on your days off, you can't eat 45 pints of ice cream, right? And you can't skydive off top of the building. You have to take care of yourself, right? You have to take care of yourself mentally and physically. And I'm going to say the same is true for our faith, right? I think a lot of Americans are maybe Sunday Christians. Anybody know what a Sunday Christian is? See some shaking your heads? They go to church on Sunday and they say, man, I fulfilled my my weekly commitment to being a Christian. I showed up to church on Sunday, I brought the family, bingo, good for me. Hey, guess what, God? See you next Sunday, right? That's a Sunday Christian. Okay, but that's not what this says. This says, take up their cross daily and follow me. Okay? And so this verse gets directly what it means to be a Christian. That's daily commitment. Jesus didn't just say, follow me when it's convenient. He didn't say, follow me when you feel like it. He said, take up your cross daily. Right? Take up your cross is another metaphor in the Bible there, right? Was that easy for Jesus to carry on the cross in the condition that he was in? Was it easy for him to carry the cross as far as they made him carry it? No. Right? God does not promise, Jesus did not promise that the Christian life was going to be easy. But he did promise you it was going to be worth it. Right? He says it many times in the Bible about what you get for following Jesus, right? And so, obviously we can make very easy parallels to being an athlete daily, right? And doing the things you're supposed to be doing. But it's about being consistent, right? We all know what it means about being consistent, right? So I'm going to have a couple challenges for you at the end, but I'm going to challenge you, and I do this to my football team all the time when we give our chapels, right? Is to find something that you can do daily to get your mind into Christ every single day, right? Whether it's you're wearing one of these cool FCA bracelets and every time you look at it, you say a cool prayer. I'm going to pull up my phone. Okay, every morning I get a text message a little bit after 8 a.m. and it sends me something called Daily Hope. It's a video message. I get it from my church. I go to church in Brownsburg. I live in Brownsburg. When I clicked on this thing,
Daily Hope. I wonder if you ever know.
my pastor hops on and he gives me anywhere a 2 to a 5 minute daily message, right? And he doesn't do anything but sit there and talk. So on my ride home, I have a ride from Brownsburg into here. The first thing I do before I listen to any music, any podcast, anything, if I'm in my car after 8 a.m., I listen to Daily Hope first. And I do that intentionally because I've given talks like this, and I want to put God first before anything else, right? So I get up, I get my kids on the bus, I get in the car, I start driving, and I see that text message from Daily Hope, and I need something to remind me. That's okay. You don't have to automatically memorize everything. You don't have to oh, it's 10 a.m. You can set an alarm on your phone, right? You're allowed to set alarms on your phone. You're allowed to set reminders. I just get that daily text message. So I know every day I get that text message, I pop it up, I put it on the phone, I don't have to watch them, I can hear it, and that kind of gives me that thing. And guess what? I daydream a lot. And if I daydream during the message, I rewind it. Right? I think my record's 6 times. I had to rewind it 6 times because I kept thinking about something else in the message, right? But I make sure I hear that to completion every single day, right? Now hopefully that's not the only time I'm talking to God, but I found something that works for me. That may not work for you. That may not work for you. You have to find something daily that works for you. Maybe it's getting in your word, right? In my early 20s, after I graduated college, I made it a point to read the Bible front to back. And so in order. So every night I read a chapter or two. Sometimes I only read a couple verses, put the bookmark in, and it took me a little over a year, but I got through the whole thing, right? Whatever that was, whatever you're motivated to do, find something to do with it. Do it daily, okay? That's the key. I know you're busy, right? You have college athletics. You have a lot of school commitments. You have a lot of social commitments, but do it daily, okay? Life, I say this to my football team all the time, and I'm going to keep saying that, but you guys think at every different stage in your life is hard, right? Middle school is hard, right? For some of you, school is hard in middle school. For some of you, socially, middle school is hard. Then you got the high school, man. Being a college freshman or a high school freshman, man, that's hard, right? Trying to make the teams, senior stuff in Lake Mikowski's little butt into a locker all the time, at Carmel High School. Life can be hard, right? When I got to college, I was like, man, college is the best thing ever. And then I started going to class, and then I got that first set of exams, and then I got to that first set of finals, and I was like, man, life's hard, right? Trying to be a college athlete, trying to do well in school, trying to handle social, all that stuff. Life's hard, right? Guess what? Life doesn't get easier, right? Because I was in college one time, and I said, man, as soon as I graduate, and I don't have to go to those stinking classes anymore, I'm going to have it made. Life's going to be easy. And then I graduated, and then I was like, Well, now my parents want me out of the house. I got to get a job, right? I majored in communication. I don't have a job in radio yet, and I was, all of a sudden I ended up going to play football overseas in Finland because I didn't have a job, right? A lot of you DePaul people hopefully have jobs way before you graduate, right? That's the beauty of going here. But life doesn't get easier, it only gets harder, right? And I can imagine, this is a big thing I said last year, I cannot imagine going through life. And if you look at my life in total, like you look at my life from a 10,000 foot view compared to what everybody else has, I have it easy. In a grand scheme of the entire world, I have it easy, and I can't imagine going through life by myself, without God, without my faith. Okay? So you guys are going to face difficult times in life, right? I still have my father with me. Our men's basketball coach just lost his father 3 days ago. Today was his funeral, right? Life doesn't get easier for him. Now he's got to go through the rest of his life without his father, without his son's grandparents, right? Life doesn't get easier. You just have to get better at handling hard. And there's an easier way to get through life, and that's to make sure you have faith, right? And to have faith is daily. So don't just follow them. Don't just call to them when life's hard or when you have a test coming up, right? Or you have a tough game coming up, but do it daily, right? Do it daily, okay? For some of you, like, think about how committed you are to your sport. What would it look like if you were that committed to Christ? What would it look like if you were that committed to spreading the word of God? Right? So that theme in this first one here is, man, following Jesus isn't about feeling inspired, right? It's about being committed daily. Daily. It's about choosing obedience over comfort, faith over feelings, and purpose over convenience every single day. Okay? So that's section 1. Okay? Going to section 2. Okay? Commitment through discipline. Right? Us as athletes, we all know discipline. Right? It goes hand in hand with the first thing we just talked about. Okay? So 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 24 to 27 said, "Do you not know that in a race all runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do not get a crown, or they do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever." Right? This is a quote you've probably heard a lot. Anytime you get sports in this, man, it goes all the time. Right? As athletes, you guys know what it takes to compete. You train, you sacrifice, you discipline yourself, but you don't get to be great by accident. Teams don't get to be great by accident. You don't stumble into excellence, right? You have to work at it. Right? You don't roll out of bed one day and just break a school record. It takes discipline, it takes sacrifice. Right? And that's what it takes to be a Christian too. Right? It takes discipline and it takes sacrifice. Okay? But what Paul's saying here, it's the same mindset that makes you successful on the field. It's going to make you strong in your faith. Okay? Because in your walk with Christ, there will be days when you just don't feel motivated. Right? Maybe you're having a string of bad luck. Right? Maybe there's just days when sinning looks easier. Right? When society of this world tells you to take shortcuts. Right? That's going to happen. When distractions feel a little bit stronger than doing the right thing. Okay? But the follower of Christ says, no, I'm running for a different prize. Right? Because I coach football. I know we're playing for a conference championship. I know we play for the Monon Bell. But that's temporary. That is a temporary thing. Every year something new happens and it changes hands. Whatnot. Right? I know that bell's going to decay. I know that bell's not going to heaven. But Christ lasts forever. Our faith lasts forever. Right? So we love sports, right? I have a job in sports. Right? You guys love sports or you wouldn't be here playing Division III athletics. But remember that spiritual discipline is real. Right? That God is real. Heaven is real. Salvation is real. Okay? And it takes discipline to make sure we stay in it. Because God just doesn't want us to get baptized and then go and vanish for the next 40 years. And then when we think we're getting to the end of our life, be like, okay, well, remember I'm going to heaven, so I better check back in with the man upstairs and make sure we're all good still, right? You want to be affecting change. You want to be living for Christ, right? I'm not going to get political today, right? I'm not going to do any of that, but stay true to God, stay true to your spiritual stuff, and do it through discipline. Okay? What's really cool is the next kind of thing, is everybody reads this part of it, right? And you kind of stop. But the very next kind of verse there in the line, Paul finishes this passage and he says, I strike a blow to my body and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. If you're an athlete, how freaking cool is that line? Can I read it again? I strike a blow to my body and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. Only athletes understand that, right? Only athletes understand what you put your body through, what you go through Coach Howard's workout for, right? Your body's sore, and you're running hills in the summer, and you're running basketball, set of lines, and you're doing that, and your lungs are burning. I can still feel that from going from high school to basketball, football to basketball, right? Your lungs are burning, right? But you do it for a reason. You do it because it's going to make you better. That's why you put in all those hard hours. That's why you put in those long hours, right? That is such a cool line that I think only athletes understand when he says, I strike a blow to my body and make it my slave, so that after I preach to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. Because he's going off and he's preaching, right? But what he can't do is then turn around and go back on his word, and then they see him in town doing exactly what they said not to do, right? It takes sacrifice to be a Christian. That doesn't mean that God's telling you to be perfect, right? He's not saying be perfect. He's just saying do as best as you can, as much as you can do it, right? We're all going to sin. Right? We understand that. Everybody knows that. But keep going to God and keep having that discipline. Okay? Here's one more thing I got down here. It says, I'm not going to let my feelings, my impulses, or my comfort dictate how I live. I'm training my soul to obey God no matter what. And that's great correlation with you guys have a special connection to that, to the spiritual discipline, because you're a physical athlete and you understand what it takes to be disciplined. You understand what that takes and how can you apply it to your spiritual life. Okay? Discipline in sports makes you a great player. Okay? Discipline in faith makes you a strong follower of Christ. One wins a trophy that fades. One wins a trophy that lasts forever. Okay? So remember that when you have discipline every single day. Okay? All right. Subsection number 3 here. Okay? Commitment ahead of comfort or commitment over comfort. Okay? Our bodies are built for comfortable. Right? We like when stuff's comfortable. Nothing like going to bed at night when you're tired. You lay your head down on your pillow, right? And you feel comfortable and you drift off into sleep. Right? But sometimes comfort isn't good. Right? Sometimes making the comfortable decision isn't the right decision. Sometimes making a decision that's right with society isn't what's right with our Lord, right? And sometimes we need to sacrifice, sometimes we need to make it so it's not comfortable, okay? So our first verse here, Galatians 6, chapter 6, verse 9 says, let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Okay? Remember, DePaul's motto is DePaul never quits, right? There's a phrase in sports, right? Comfort never made anybody great, right? When you think about sports, right? Everybody wants to go and have an easy practice, right? Everybody wants to have to go and make an easy workout. But the easy workouts, the comfortable workouts, if you never push yourself, you're never going to be the best at anything, right? Michael Phelps didn't train comfortably. He trained very uncomfortably, right? He pushed himself to the limit, right? So sometimes you have to make hard decisions. On the field, sometimes you have to make hard decisions when you're by yourself and you're training and nobody's watching, right? And sometimes the moment, I've heard this in business, I've heard this a lot in success books, like the moment you get comfortable is the moment you stop growing, right? Have you guys ever heard either get better or get worse? Right? You guys have heard that? Right? That's true in sports, but it can also be true with our spiritual life as well, okay? Paul's reminding us here that we need to do the right thing, that living for God, serving others, staying faithful isn't always easy. Sometimes there's going to be times where we get tired, that we get spiritually tired. Sometimes it feels like what we're doing the right thing is, man, it's just not paying off. And sometimes you wonder if all the effort is even worth it, right? But God says, don't give up, keep going. There is a harvest coming, right? I've had seasons in my life that felt like God was not as present in my life as He is at other times. right? There's times where you go through stuff in life when bad things starts to happen one after another, and it feels like, man, I just can't get out of this rut, and you feel hard, but understand to stay committed, to stay faithful, right? There's certain things, and again, I'm not going to get into all the vices of the world that can make you feel comfortable with alcohol and drugs and all that stuff. I don't want to get into that. But it's one of those things that like people in the world do turn to that stuff, right? To make them feel better, right? To make them feel better, they turn to artificial substances to make them feel a different way, to drown their sorrows and things like that. You've heard all those terms, right? But us as Christians, we need to be very careful of that, right? We need to be very careful to put ourselves into artificial things that are going to make us feel a certain way, right? We have to understand that life's going to go through seasons. We're going to go through seasons, good seasons and bad seasons, right? But staying faithful, staying true, keep showing up to God and for God and with God, and He eventually is going to make it pay off for us, right? We may not know why we're going through things, but there's been so many things in my life, and I shared this last year. There's been so many times in my life that I've been like, man, I don't even know what I'm doing here. I don't know where I'm going. But I stayed committed. I stayed praying, right? I didn't always make the right decision, but I felt like I always listened to God when I needed to, or not when I needed to, sorry, at the right times. And there was something that was put into my life, and I shared this last time. I met somebody when I was in Kansas City playing football there. I didn't know why I was there, right? I felt like I was kind of in a rut, and I was praying. I was like, God, please tell me what I'm supposed to do next. I had a roommate who did not, we just didn't get along, right? We just didn't have the same, he was from the other side of the country, we didn't like the same things, this, that, the other. I don't even know why I was rude with him, but he was gone in the mornings. Like I never saw him before practice, right? Never saw him before practice. And one day, 6 weeks after I met him, I said, dude, where do you go in the mornings? Like, what are you doing in the mornings? And he's like, I'm praying. And it was like, dude, light bulb moment of like, I've met this dude, I've been living with this dude for 6 weeks, and we had never once had any kind of faith type conversation at all. And like the second that me and him clicked on that level, the second it was almost like we had a lot of differences, and that didn't matter anymore. The fact that we were both Christian, like that just united us, and I learned a lot from him. And I felt like I needed an important lesson in life, that God put me there for a certain reason. And that was not easy. It was not comfortable to live with him. It was not comfortable to live with him. But then once we did that, man, we clicked on a whole nother level. And I felt like I got what I needed from him, right? So I don't really know where I'm going with that, because again, this is the first time I've given this talk. But sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes it's uncomfortable. Sometimes the Christian life is uncomfortable, right? Sometimes you have to make decisions that's not easy for you to live. Sometimes you have to make decisions when you're back home, right? Your buddies want you to stay out till 3 a.m. drinking, and you're like, no, I'm reporting to camp in 2 weeks. I got to stay faithful to my team. I got to make sure that I'm ready to go in a couple weeks, right? So you make a bunch of sacrifices on the athletic side. You need to make sacrifices on the spiritual side too, okay? So I have a challenge here, okay? It says, if you only follow Jesus when it's easy, you'll quit the moment life gets hard. But if you're truly committed to Him, you'll keep walking even when the road gets tough, because you trust the one who's leading you, okay? And so I promise you that if you follow God when life's good, and you praise God when stuff's going great, He's going to be there when you need Him when life does not go well. Right? There's times that if you don't celebrate Him in the good and you only go into Him in the bad, it may feel empty. It may feel like He's not there, even though He is there, because you haven't accessed Him in the good, so you don't know what that feels like in the bad. Am I making any sense to anybody? Okay? You have to feel Him in His goodness to feel Him when you need Him the most. If you only go to Him in one of those things, it's not gonna feel right to you. Okay? And you're gonna feel something inside of you too, because you need both. You need the daily, you need the discipline. And I promise you, going through this life, He's been there when I needed Him the most, and He's also been there in my biggest moments too. right? So don't forget him in your biggest moments. Make sure you're there for him too, okay? God doesn't bless comfort, he blesses commitment, okay? God doesn't bless comfort, he blesses commitment. When you stay faithful in the hard stuff, that's when you grow. That's when you build strength, okay? And that's when you become the person God created you to be, right? When somebody's going through something hard in life and you're there for them, even though that's not easy all the time, is to talk about difficult things and be there for a friend in difficult need and have true compassion. That's not always easy. Some people don't like that stuff. I tend to run like, I don't know how to comfort somebody that's crying. That's not one of my strong suits. But I try to do it because I know that's what Jesus would have done, right? That's not easy for me as a human being, but I try to be there and do that because that's easy. Now, as you have kids, it becomes easier to do that because your kids cry every day, right? And you got to be there for them. So, all right, that's the next section. How am I doing? Am I doing all right? Yeah. Okay. All right. Here's my last kind of main point in this thing. And it's a short little quote here. And this is like my last little section of my chapter here. Okay? And it's kind of like the theme of my whole thing. Okay? Don't rely on feelings, rely on faith. Okay? 2 Corinthians 5:7. This is honestly one of the verses that I read that I kind of matched up with a quote that I heard. That really kind of made this chapter for me. Okay? 2 Corinthians 5-7 says, "For we live by faith, not by sight." For we live by faith, not by sight. Right? I know that's a song. It's a song when I was growing up. But it really kind of sticks with me, in the season of life that we are now. For we live by faith, not by sight. Because we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Right? We don't know what's going to happen in 2 days. Right? You can live in a lot of fear. Right? I have 3 kids. I have an 8th grader, I have a 4th grader, and I have a kindergartner. Right? My wife's an elementary principal. And yesterday, they had a brand new student that is not from this country. She's a principal in Speedway. And they lost the student. They lost that new student. And because they don't have buses in Speedway school system. They don't have buses, so everybody walks. Right? So you walk home. Right? You have a car ride or you walk home. Right? And so she has a lot of kind of foreign students in that area. And this student just came over, really, I think from Haiti. So the student doesn't know English, right? Kindergartner that doesn't know English. And all of a sudden, at the end of school, they can't find her, right? They found her 3 streets over at the Freddy's. Anybody know Freddy's Steakhouse? I guess they ate at Freddy's the day before, and she recognized that building, and they went there, but friggin' lost a student, right? That's scary stuff, right? My kindergartner can get lost, right? My kindergartner can do this. My 8th grader can get caught up in a lot of different things. Like there's a lot of stuff in life that you can be fearful of if you let it capture you, right? But don't rely on your feelings. Live by faith, right? Live by faith. Like, live fearlessly too, right? Live by faith knowing that God's got your back, that you know where you're going if you've been baptized, where you're ultimately going to go. Because God doesn't want us to live in fear. He wants us to live in faith, right? So don't rely on your feelings, right? Feelings are fleeting. Human feelings are weird, right? I have a lot of feelings. I had a lot of feelings in our Denison football game last week, right? I had a lot of feelings going through that game. When I went back and I watched the film, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was, as what we were going through. We were up 28-0, and in the 4th quarter it was tied 28-28. Okay, I had a lot of bad feelings in that game. When I rewatched the game and I watched the offense and I watched the defense, my feelings changed about it. Right? But because I was going through it in that moment, we're human. We're flawed. We're going to have bad types of feelings. We're going to have bad thoughts in our heads. Right? But don't live by sight. Live by faith. Right? Don't live by sight. Don't rely on what we see human-wise. Right? Does anybody know that AI video generator called Sora? Anybody seen that? I've seen some crazy things created by Sora. Right? And if you didn't know that was AI, man, you could be deceived by a lot of different things. I mean, I've seen crazy stuff on that thing. Thank God we don't live by sight, right? Because we as humans, we see a lot of different things. Right? You may see something that you thought happened in a game, Right? Man, I know I was getting held in that play. Right? Or I know that ball went out of bounds. And then you go back and you watch the film, and you're like, oh, I was wrong. Because on film right here, I see a different perspective. I see a different view. And my thing has changed, right? This is life. Human feelings are going to change. Right? How you feel about the person sitting to your right and the person sitting to your left are going to change. Homer may hate Blake one day, and he may love him the next day. Right? But guess what doesn't change? God doesn't change. Jesus doesn't change. The Word, the Bible doesn't change, right? So don't live by sight. Don't live by fleeting feelings. Live by faith. Live by what you know is true. Now spit. Okay? Live by what you know is true. Okay? And we know this is true. We believe this is true. Right? You wouldn't be sitting in this room if you didn't believe this is true. So you know what that does? That gives us faith. That gives us strength to go out and play in our next competition and play fearlessly. Because we know at the end of the day, the wins are temporary. Right? That win's temporary. That Denison win's temporary. Now I'm on to the next one. Now I'm going to beat Ohio Wesleyan's butt. Right? That's temporary. This is not temporary. This is forever. You know how long forever is? I'm 42 years old. That's forever in your eyes, right? I'm over double how old you are. I'm 44 years old. I'm over double everybody in this room. Now I'm old. That's forever. Right? And forever is so many eons past me, right? You guys are so young. But if you get this stuff right, if you understand and you live by faith, and you understand that God is real and God is true. Let me tell you something that's hard. Here's something that's hard, and you guys got to think about this. You know, when you're little, Santa Claus is real, right? I got a kindergartner. She believes in Santa Claus. She believes in the Easter Bunny, right? This is what's hard. When they're little, they're in kindergarten, every Sunday my daughter goes to Bible school, right? We go to big church, she goes to little church, they learn all about God, they do all that stuff. So does my 4th grader, so does my 8th grader, right? At some point, she's going to realize, I've never seen Santa other than the fake Santa in the mall, right? And we're going to tell her Santa's fake, and we're going to tell her the Easter Bunny doesn't exist. But know what's hard in that little kid's mind? Hey, we've been telling you about Jesus since you've been born too, but guess what? He's real. Right? That was hard for me as a parent. I'm like, oh God, how do I navigate this? Right? And it's still hard. Right? What do you guys do right before this? You have the highs and lows? I have a high to share. 2-3 weeks ago, my son was baptized. My 8th grade son was baptized. That's awesome. That's lifelong goal number 1, bucket list number 1 checked off. Because my number 1 job as a parent is to get all my kids to follow God as long as, as quick and as long as I possibly can. It's one of my biggest fears too. Of like, what if they stray away? Or what if they don't, and all this and all that. Right? But the sooner you guys can understand, and the more that you can get everybody else that you know to understand, this is real. There's people out there in the world that don't believe that God exists. Can you guys imagine going through life without that? That's our job. Part of our job is to help, bring Jesus, bring the light of God to other people that we come in contact with. Because I can't imagine not having God going through everything I've gone through in life. And again, I've had a pretty easy life. But that's why we should sacrifice for Him. That's why we should have faith, because we know at the end of the day, 44 years from now, when I die, I'm going to heaven. I know that. I know that for a fact. I've been baptized. I know that's where I'm going. If you've been baptized, you should know that's where you're going. Right? I know there's a thing the other day, I told you I wasn't going to get political. Trump was asking people, do you believe I'm going to heaven? Right? If you've been baptized, don't question if you're going to heaven. You're going to heaven. Okay? Your job is to get as many people as you love to also go to heaven with you. Right? Because God is real, God is true, God is going to help you get through this life. But we have to live by faith, because we don't see He doesn't come down and you don't see Him in the physical presence. But that's what makes true faith, because it's not easy. It's not easy. You have to rely on something, you have to trust something, you have to trust that this is true. You have to believe that this is true. You have to believe the Bible is true to live it, and to live it your whole life. Right? So don't rely on your feelings, because feelings are fleeting. Feelings are fake. right? Feelings are temporary. We're human. We're going to have feelings. But live by faith. Live by commitment. Live by discipline. Live by daily talking to God, and He'll get you through a lot of these things. Okay? He'll get you through life. He'll get you through the good. He'll get you through the bad. And so I think that us as athletes, like to close it up, like I think for us as athletes, I think we have the blueprint of how to live the life as a Christian. Right? You have to make sacrifices to be a college athlete. Right? You have to make sacrifices to win championships. Right? You have to have discipline in your life, and that comes with sacrifice. You have to have daily commitment to your sport, and that's what it's going to take for us to live a good Christian life. Because guess what? If I'm not a good Christian role model to my kids, do you think they're going to follow? Probably not. Do you think if I don't treat my wife, like just the same way, if I don't treat my wife correctly and I don't respect my wife in the household, should I expect my sons to grow up to respect women? No. Right? Same way, if I'm not leading a strong Christian faith and I'm not, and I take the long road with my kids and I don't take shortcuts with my kids, hopefully they learn those lessons and then they take that on with them. But one of my most important jobs, I would argue my most important job, is not to make sure he goes to school every day, but is to make sure that he lives a Christian life. Right? And that's why I've been praying for years and years and years about my son being baptized, and anytime our church says, write down your prayers, I'm writing down that my son Brady gets baptized. And sure enough, like kind of out of the blue, 3 weeks ago, my wife had mentioned, hey, they're doing baptisms. We've been doing a couple baptisms in the church. And he goes, I want to do that. And we were like, let's go. Right? And so we talked to him more about it and things like that, which was awesome because we didn't want to say, hey, you're doing this, because we don't want to make him do it. It needs to be his decision. Right? It needs to be your decision to get baptized. It needs to be your friend's decision to get baptized. You can't make anybody do anything. Okay? It needs to be a personal commitment to follow Christ. And so I got to baptize him. I only cried like 5 times during the whole thing. Because again, it's been my hope, my dream, what I want for my kids is to follow Christ and be great Christians, and 1 down, 2 to go. Okay? But that doesn't mean I stop, with my older son. That means the journey's just begun, right? And so hopefully you guys are in the middle of your journey. Hopefully you continue to get better and better, because we're either getting better or we're getting worse, right? And so that's what I got for you today. And God doesn't call us to be perfect. He calls us to be faithful, okay? Faithfulness is built on commitment, not on convenience. Faithfulness is built on commitment, not on convenience. Okay, it's not easy, okay? But making that daily commitment, finding a way to do it, is important. It's important life stuff for you and in your journey through life. Whether your significant other and your future family, this needs to be the basis of that. I promise you that. Okay? And I know somebody talked about that, right? The Whiteners talked about that, right? Finding faithful partners and to grow in Christ with each other. So look, we're all building on each other. Awesome. Okay. I have one more quote for you, one more Bible verse. Yeah. Okay, it's right here. Okay. James 1, chapter 1, verse 12. Okay, blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised. Okay, bow your heads. Lord, thank you for bringing these young people into this room today to hear a message of faith, to hear a message of perseverance and commitment. Thank you for putting these words on my heart and putting these words on my lips. Help these young people grow in faith, to grow in you, to know that whether they're going through the good or the bad, that you are there for them. Whether it seems like you're there or not, regardless of their feelings, let them have faith to know that you are always there for them, in the good and in the bad. Help keep these young people free from temptation as much as we possibly can. Help them press on towards their goal to win the prize for which you have called them to. Help them be faithful to their classmates, their teammates, their families. Help them continue to bring Christ into everything that they do, and help them be great stewards of your name. In your name we pray. Amen. Thank you, guys.
said that was the first time you gave that message. It didn't sound like it. Don't let it be the last either, because
Okay.
that was really encouraging.
Chapter 2 of my book.
All right, I got one more thing for you guys here. Let's see if it comes up. Coach talked about living for Christ, living with Christ, right? And how like he doesn't know how to do it without Christ, right? How to handle life, all of that. If you're hearing about this and you're not really sure what that looks like to give your life to Christ, Joe Summers, our FCA rep for the area, he gave us this resource, so you can text that code to that number there, and it'll kind of walk you through a conversation of like getting to know Christ, answer some of your questions. Again, you can always come to anyone on exec to talk about those things, but if you don't feel comfortable doing that, this is a resource we have for you guys. So I just wanted to let you know about that. And other than that, just really grateful to see all of you here. Thank you again, Coach, for coming to speak. You guys can pray out at your tables and then write down prayers and prayer cards, and we will pray over those. Thank you.
Coach, we recorded every video, so I just wanted to check it's okay to post it on YouTube. Awesome. I'll make sure to send that to you then too once it's up.